Okay, I'm joined now by Mark Humphreys to talk about what the board perspective on AI is and also how investors view AI. Mark's an ex-investment banker himself, an ex-CEO. He's also chair of a number of PE-backed businesses. He's a current beekeeper, a trainee sommelier, and a pretty accomplished skier. So, Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Ian.
So, first of all, Mark, I'm really intrigued to understand what you see the state of AI maturity in the market today. We've heard lots about what businesses do well and not so well, but I'd like to level set this first with the businesses that you work with as well as what you see outside of those, how mature they are and how they're viewing AI.
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, I chair a number of companies on behalf of PE firms, currently chairing 4. And across the 4 businesses I work with, I would say that we are reasonably well progressed with how we're thinking about AI. When I look outside of those 4 businesses, I feel that others are some way behind in that respect. And I think the reason why we're probably more AI progressed is we had the agitation of the PE investor around our board table, and they've been quite alert to this world of AI and the opportunity, particularly in respect of growing enterprise value. So they've been really good at kind of been agitating us, putting questions in front of us, bringing advisors in front of us. So we've had no choice but to get on the bus and start thinking about AI. And what's particularly helped in the world that I live in is we have our founders that are still in these businesses, and they may have progressed out of being the CEO, but they're still in the business. And what I'm actually discovering is there's no better person than the founder to start thinking about AI, because these are the people that have built these businesses that I'm now chairing. And now they're thinking about how could they reinvent the business that they created. So that's why I think we're pretty much on our money in terms of progressing AI and the strategy of AI.
Do you think some of that maturity that you're seeing is driven by the sector that you're operating in? So, for example, if I look from afar at the sectors who I think are doing quite well and are advancing, professional services and financial services, perhaps TMT, are a bit more mature. And then other businesses, which are perhaps manufacturing, supply chain businesses, a little bit more lagging. Is there some of that playing in?
I'm sure that's true. One of my businesses is in the financial service sector, and fintechs would be our clients, so we're probably being progressed by them. I also chair in the world of people-led businesses, and therefore we're all thinking a little bit about how we amplify the human or maybe someday replace the human. So you're probably right. Definitely in the world that I'm in, professional services, we're probably well thought through on this.
Fantastic. So when you look at the way that strategy's building within each of these boards, how are they viewing AI within this strategic conversation? Are they seeing it as something that's integral and a part of executing on that strategy? Or are they seeing it as a topic of its own right, which can then be used to test the strategy that's emerging?
Yeah, do you know, there's so many shades of grey in that question, and I don't think we've figured it out. So some of these businesses are treating it like an incubator, like a lab. So we're kind of doing it on the side of the business. And the pros of that, of course, is we can probably go faster. We can put our best talent in there, we can put a defined amount of investment in there, and we can keep a really close eye on it. We probably know that's not the end answer, though. We have to ultimately disrupt these businesses, and AI will be so integral to everything. But if you start there, then things feel really slow. Change is hard for people, and asking them to adopt and use AI, you're only going to go as fast as your weakest link, and therefore you go really slow, and therefore you start to feel like your competitors are getting ahead of you. But we probably know we have to get there eventually. It just feels the hardest way to do it. So for now, we're probably mostly using incubators. It's probably all reporting into the chief strategy officer, and it's kind of like a lab within the business.
Can I follow up with a question on that one? Yeah. So in most of those incubation, are they more inclined around value creation and IP within the business, or are they looking at AI and automation as an efficiency for, liability removal, really?
Yeah, so this is a great question about how do we think about where to place our bets in private equity-backed businesses, and in particular, where to start with your first pilot. And we're quite defined in terms of how we think about it. We think about a bucket of, where's our kind of highest, highest friction within the business. So where are the problems that we could quickly solve using AI? That's a good bucket to go after. Then you think about kind of where it's going to be adopted probably the fastest and the easiest, like sales would be a really good example. We should probably come back to that because there's lots of great use cases at the moment within the commercial function or the sales function. Then you can think about strategy itself, where better to place AI than in the future version of the business that you're building. And then the final one that we've thought about is either where we've got highest cost from as an external supplier. So your lawyers might be a great example. So how much of the legal work can you bring in-house using agents? Or what's a virtual employee that you could never afford? Why don't you make an agent of that? So those are things that we think about in terms of where we start with our pilots. But no doubt, the place that we've had the best adoption across all the businesses that I work with is in the commercial function, the sales function.
Interesting. And does that actually equal revenue generation? Or is it supplementary to the existing human interaction or the human-to-human interaction?
Well, what I've discovered so far is if you make the human believe potentially that they're ultimately going to be replaced from the adoption that you're asking them, then they kind of say no at that point and they don't really experiment. They're not curious. They don't adopt it. But if you can help amplify the human. So first of all, help the human. This is what we've done in all of the businesses. Help the human understand themselves, their self-awareness, what's their superpower. Give them AI that actually amplifies or accelerates that superpower, and suddenly they start to feel like they're really productive and they're doing great work. And in the sales function, of course, you typically got a character who is driven, highly driven, commission-based, loves the thrill of a win, likes change, not really change averse. And what they're able to do now is do more work in terms of being with people, potential clients, rather than doing the heavy lifting that's often involved in sales. So really easy for us to put agents in there around lead generation, proposal writing, responding to RFPs, RFIs, building strategic account plans, building attack plans, all those things that all felt really heavy lifting that salespeople hate to do, filling out CRM, all these things.
All the things salespeople are terrible.
All these things that salespeople hate doing. You can now make that, AI enabled, of course, by giving them an agent. And if you believe, and I believe most people do, that people buy from people, I don't think salespeople will ever get replaced in an organization. Therefore, why not amplify your salespeople, give them more sales time face to face with the client, but make them more productive by giving them some AI tools.
So I think that kind of efficiency and effective argument around AI is really seductive. It augments people, makes them better versions of themselves and all of that. But when you've implemented those kind of tools, are you seeing actual bottom line improvements that are verifiable, or are you just seeing improvements in your efficiency metrics?
Yeah, well, certainly, if I then take half a step back and then answer that. So when we think about let's say the whole P&L account in a private equity-backed business, and we're thinking about EBITDA itself, but we're also thinking about a multiplier of EBITDA to produce the enterprise value. When we look at overhead, I think there's an opportunity there, obviously, to find productivity improvements, replacing a HR person, replacing an accounts receivable person, whatever it may be. But you kind of get a one-time benefit. It does drop to EBITDA, but someone's not really going to change the multiple because you've done that. So then coming up the P&L, you get to gross margin, and I think there's lots of opportunity to create productivity improvements. But again, it's probably a one-time improvement, and at some point, your competitors will probably catch up with you if you assume that everybody's as smart as you, and therefore pricing ultimately is going to get adjusted. So that gross margin improvement feels possibly a short-time window that ultimately will get taken away from you. Where we believe the big multiplier is back into the sales function, because if you can generate organic growth, which is what we're all hungry for, of course, get that sales growth, that will drop to the bottom line ultimately. And if you're at least growing in double-digit terms, then you're going to get an improvement on your multiplier. So that's where we believe the big EV uptakes are in a PE-backed business. So we're all going after the sales agents rather than the overhead agents.
So you're looking to go top line.
Totally, yeah. And if all these are choices, because you can't do everything. If you had a magic wand, you probably would do everything. But if you've only got limited choices and you believe in doing fewer things and doing them better, then we're going after the commercial function rather than going after the back office.
Yeah. And value from a PE perspective, or if you're looking, I'm just thinking if I'm a founder owner looking for investment and looking to build in private equity, and I'm going to go and build out some agentic services as part of my revenue generation. From your perspective, is the tooling important? So do I go and build my own AI voice AI agent that can go out and do calls? Do I spend time building our own agents, or do I buy off the shelf to speed up that value cycle as quickly as possible? To you, does that matter? Or
Yeah, well, and this may come back to the point you were asking me around maturity. And I believe in these 4 businesses that I'm currently chairing, we're reasonably mature in this point that I'm about to make, which I think we're starting to realize that actually the agent is almost a commodity. Because actually they're not that hard. Yeah, but they were hard like 3 months ago to build, but actually they're quite easy to build now. And if you assume everybody's smart enough, they'll all catch up at some point. What we've realized actually is what's really smart is to capture the intelligence within the organization. And AI is allowing us to do it in a way like we've never been able to do before. So we're creating kind of vectorized databases of internal conversations. So we might be having a conversation about a sales campaign or a marketing campaign. Let's capture that using AI and record it and kind of stick it in a database for future access. Imagine you could do that with a sales meeting as well. Like almost every meeting, a strategy session, an offsite, capture it all so it's all accessible by an agent. Then what we do is build playbooks. Sales playbook would be a classic. Sales playbooks have been around like for donkey's years, and they've been used as a way of coaching or training a sales team. And sales teams hated it, of course. It was like a chalk and talk day where they just got lectured at by a sales trainer and then they forgot it, within 5 days probably. But now you could ask the agent to go to the playbook to discover your most efficient, your best workflow, and then access your intelligence. That's what we're now starting to see. So the agent in all this actually is just something that feels like a hygiene factor rather than the vectorized database where all your intelligence, your knowledge, your IP sits. So that's what we're currently doing.
And I guess that extends to having a digital twin for almost any role within the business.
Well, yeah, it's funny you should say that, but we're experimenting with that. I know that in the 4 businesses I work with, the chief commercial officer has a AI twin of themselves, which has got all their sales playbooks in, all their sales frameworks in. It's kind of all got all the sales methodologies. It's got MedPick in there. It's got Challenger in there. It's got Jolt in there. So they've always got access to the best knowledge because we can't always turn up every day and be superhuman and our best selves, even with 4 double espressos. But the AI agent can with the sales playbook and with all your intelligence. The CPOs have got the same. They've got a strategic chief people officer agent that they access to help them do their work. So I definitely think people should be experimenting with this idea of having an AI twin. I certainly have one, and I started experimenting with this a couple of months ago, and it's super interesting. So my job sometimes feels really lonely. I don't have a team. It's not like the old days where I used to either be part of an M&A team, or when I was a CEO, I had a kind of team of people reporting into me. My world feels quite lonely some days, and I thought it'd be quite fun to have a thought partner. So I built myself as a thought partner, and I could kind of experiment and ask this thing questions. I actually gave it a name because it felt a bit wrong not to give it a name. So it's called Neville. Only because I found the name a funny name, really. So I built Neville. So Neville has my CV in it. It has my job description in it, so it knows what I should be doing every day. It's got all my favorite business books that I've ever read, so it has constant access to them. It's got all my frameworks in there that I might use. So, I love using Eisenhower frameworks for how you decide how to prioritize, for example. And it's also got my psychometric profile in there. Because I am a little bit worried that whilst we all might feel a little bit cleverer using AI, the risk is we all now sound quite similar. You can probably spot immediately if someone's using AI. So how do you prevent that? And how do you retain the diversity in an organization? How do you retain a culture of diversity? You need your humans effectively to be amplifying themselves using AI. And the only way to do that is to put your psychometric profile into your AI twin. So my psychometric profile's in there. The advantage of these psychometric profiles is they're built on language. And obviously these large language models like language, so give it language to play with. So when my AI, Neville, works with me, so I go specifically into my GPTs in ChatGPT, and that's where I find Neville. he or it, whatever it might be, he or it is using my values. It knows my weaknesses. It knows my blind spots. And I've actually built myself a virtual advisory board. So I thought that would be quite fun. Because I know my weaknesses and my blind spots, why not have a virtual advisory board that protects me against them? So when I'm prompting, one of my prompts will be accessing the virtual advisory board to say, hey, what am I missing? What am I likely to have not seen on this one? And because I've built myself an advisory board that has an agitator, a disruptor, a completion finisher, has a strategist, it has an operator, it kind of hopefully covers all the angles for me. So now when I'm working in AI, it kind of just feels so much more fulfilling and productive in terms of how I'm able to support the boards I work with or the CEOs that I work with.
And how have you noticed a change in yourself now that you've got Neville in your life?
I would definitely say I feel more productive. I probably feel work feels more fun in a bizarre way because I've kind of got like this thought partner that I can bounce an idea off, and sometimes I go, hey, that's stupid. Why did you think that? Or that is genius. Why did I not think of that?
So you don't think it stifles your creativity by being over-reliant?
No.
It encourages creativity by being able to kick around some ideas.
I think if you have the right mindset, this isn't about being lazy. This isn't about trying to work 4 days a week when you were previously working 5 days a week. It isn't about playing golf on Fridays for me. It's all about, adding more value to the people that you work with and kind of getting to a better answer, a sharper answer, a quicker answer. If we can all be more agile, operate at more pace, but with the control and protections that you might put into your agent, then I only see upside at the moment.
So it must be slightly frightening for any CEO sat opposite you and Neville on the other side of the table, because if you compare yourself pre-AI to Mark plus Neville now, you're going to be so much more informed and in the detail, so much more analytical and rounded, and so much more forensic. So the quality of the questions that you're firing at the CEO are going to, I guess, be exponentially higher. So how can your CEO adapt to that and be performant under that kind of environment?
Oh, there's so many bits to this answer. The first funny bit to this answer is Alan Patterson, who's the chief exec at Plenitude, experienced this and has written a book about it. This book is being launched next week, but it's all about him being a chief exec in a boardroom with an AI-enabled chairman. And he found the whole experience terrifying. And he's written a brilliant book about it. So I can't wait for him to release that. I mean, I got into this because actually I didn't want to be the old guy around the board table. I didn't want to be dragging the board back in terms of how it was thinking about AI. And I think that's a risk. It's a risk for a lot of chairs. We might be at the wrong end of our careers ultimately as chairs. Therefore, we might be a little less curious than we once were. We might be a little less progressive than we once were. But there's a risk because of the gravitas that we have in our boardrooms and how we drive a lot of the strategic thinking and execution that we hold businesses back. And that dawned on me, so I thought, right, I need to make sure I feel AI enabled. So I literally spent a few weekends playing around on YouTube and teaching myself. And I experimented with, most of the large language models. I happened to have fallen upon ChatGPT. I preferred version 4 to 5. But also use Copilot quite a bit or Perplexity quite a bit. So to be in this boardroom then now with an AI-enabled chair actually means the chief execs kind of don't have an excuse. And I'm lucky that the chief execs I work with are all super smart, super curious people. You'd expect that in the PE environment. So they've all gone off and effectively caught up, and we're all on this exponential curve together. If you believe this is an exponential curve, and kind of what I knew 2 weeks ago is already feeling out of date, and what I'll know in 2 weeks will make what I know today feel out of date. But if you don't get on this curve, you can't just sit there and wait, I don't think, for AI to feel like it's settled down for you and then kind of jump in. I think you've got to get on this curve. Yeah, this is not a linear curve that I think we're all sitting on at the moment.
Yeah. It's interesting you should say that about the CEO, because some of the CEOs I've interacted with recently around the topic of AI tend to be a little bit laggard. Perhaps it's because they're a bit fearful of it. Perhaps they haven't been through the education process, or perhaps it's because there's so much more noise going on around their world. So I often hear pushbacks like, well, we haven't got our data sorted yet, so we can't put AI in place till the data's sorted, or we've got an ERP program that's going on, it's taking all our bandwidth, or, and there's lots of reasons held out for not kicking on with
Excuses,
with AI.
I think we can call them.
I wasn't going to be that provocative to just call them excuses, because I think there's some genuine reasons in there. So how do you help them get across that inertia?
Sure. Well, look, let me start by saying I think it's a problem. I think if we all believe that AI is a human change problem, it's not an IT problem. If we all believe that for a second, it's a human change problem. And we've all, as leaders, led organisations through human change before. This one just happens to be more of a revolution rather than an evolution. It's happening so fast. And I think the whole organisation is looking at its leaders, the CEO in particular, not the chair. The chair is relatively invisible ultimately, but the CEO is very visible. And if the CEO at best is just signing off proof of concepts or pilots, or agreeing to licenses in next year's budget, that's not good enough for me. I think the CEO needs to feel AI first and AI literate, and needs to put all his or her authentic self out there as to what they're experimenting with, what's going well and what isn't going less well. Because the rest of the organisation will follow their lead. The risk here is that all the AI initiatives just fail because the leader is not behind it. So that's what I'm a bit worried about. So how do you encourage it, of course? Well, having a chair that's agitating is probably a good thing. Yeah, I also live in a world where the private equity firm are agitating. I think they have the benefit of a portfolio perspective, and therefore they'll know which of their businesses are more advanced than others. So they'll be agitating as well. And hopefully there's some pressure from underneath. You know, I think particularly if you've got a grad scheme in your business like we have in most of ours, you know, these people are coming straight out of university already AI enabled and probably underestimating how helpful they are in these businesses that we're running. So they're going to feel pressure from underneath as well. So I don't think there is really an option here, and certainly a chief exec in a PE world that doesn't get on and work out how to get the best of AI will quickly find themselves going backwards, and will quickly find themselves under a ton of pressure from their boards.
So if we step away from that PE-backed environment for a moment, to perhaps a FTSE 250 where they haven't got quite the same dynamic. Clearly there's investor pressure, but perhaps it's not quite so concentrated. How would you advise CEOs to prioritise between time and energy and budget on things like AI versus things like upgrading their ERP or other systems and other changes in their business? How should they think about that investment case?
Yeah, I think, well, look, it's difficult. Again, many shades of grey on this one and many nuances. I think it's hard to go all in on AI, back to that exponential curve. I think, you know, what feels right today wouldn't have felt right 2 weeks ago and won't feel right in 2 weeks' time. So I think you've got to place a few bets and, you know, use a kind of XY axis of probably value on the Y axis and time and cost on the X axis to try and kind of figure this stuff out, but be ready to fail fast. You clearly can't ignore the current BAU business because wheels start falling off pretty quickly, and you know you'll be under profit pressure or cash pressure pretty quickly. But the pressure to not experiment with AI, not find your pilots or your proof of concepts and move quickly into adopting that is kind of just so great it can't be ignored. So I think it's a balance ultimately, but you just can't do too much with AI, otherwise the whole organisation starts to feel a bit distracted.
Yeah. So I think using things like large language models to be your thought partner, I think that's an easy sell to a lot of execs because there's no real downside for them. The only cost to them really is a bit of time.
That's right. Yeah.
But then when you look through the rest of the organisation and the operating model, you start touching on things like process automation through agentic. Some real hard edges to that, isn't there? Because once you've proved your agentic case delivers an efficiency, the only way to get your return on the investment then is to change your organisation and reduce your cost base.
Yeah.
So then that starts introducing all sorts of other challenges around rebuilding your operating model, managing your people, your culture, and so on. So have you any thoughts on how you've directed, encouraged your boards to navigate that journey?
Yeah, well, look, I think we're all perplexed by this because none of us have done it before, in truth. And I think we know what's coming our way, but I don't think we've solved for it yet. You know, we know a world is coming where there will be amplified humans and lots of agents. probably far more agents than there are humans. But what we yet haven't figured out is how that's all going to collaborate. We've spent years trying to work out how to get our humans to collaborate, how to create a culture of collaboration and trust and integrity and transparency. And then suddenly you introduce these things called agents into the mix, and the humans haven't worked with these agents before, and we haven't led businesses that have got humans and agents before, and the managers haven't managed humans and agents before. Do we have managers that only manage humans and managers that only manage agents, or do we want all of our managers to be able to manage both? I don't think we've figured this out yet, and I mean, I find it quite fun to be in the builder business right now, to try and be part of the solve of all this and try and figure it out. You know, it's a privilege ultimately, and I guess I'm lucky that I'm probably at the end of my career where it's not going to have too many impacts on me. I can imagine that there's a lot of people that are quite concerned about this. But from a not model point of view, it's clearly got to change. And you know, whether that's a quick fix or whether it's a long fix, again, I don't think we know yet, Ian.
Yeah. I think there'll be some stepping stones. I don't think you're going to go one to the other instantly, are you? There's going to be an evolution. Yeah. So if you look at the sort of classic structure of the boards with each of the chiefs that you have in it, do you see that changing or a need for that to change? And if so, what are the new roles?
The change that I would really like, this is slightly controversial, but the change that I'd really like is the Chief People Officer to be the owner of the AI adoption. Why I think that's true is back to this point that this is a human change problem, not an IT problem. I'm hoping that AI does not sit with the Chief Technology Officer. I hope that's not true, because I don't think it will work if that's where it sits. Clearly they're an important stakeholder. It's not a tech problem, I don't think, no, but we need our CPOs, I think, to own it, because it's the change program, it's the adoption. Whether our CPOs are ready for this, I don't know yet. I mean, I know some brilliant CPOs who will be brilliant at this, but also know a few CPOs who are perhaps a little bit more from the recruitment world originally, or from HR ops originally, and I'm not sure they'll find this as easy as those CPOs that think about culture all the time. Because this is what it is, it's a kind of culture problem. How do we adopt without losing our diversity and everything great about our culture without breaking things? So yeah, so back to the question, do I see the board changing? I'd love to see the CPOs step up or change if that's what's needed. I don't think I'm seeing a reason for a chief AI officer, if I'm really honest.
I was going to ask actually, because that seems to be the new.
Not chief transformation officer with AI in the.
I think if you have a chief transformation officer, this is a natural place for it to sit. Maybe the change is so big that you do need a chief transformation officer.
Maybe it's just a 2 or 3 year role while you navigate that transformation, and it hits a steady state after that.
Yeah. If you need your CPO to still be focused on, you know, onboarding people, recruiting people, managing HR ops, so I kind of perhaps see the transformation bit of the CPO peeling off into the chief transformation officer. I can kind of see that.
So right now there'll be some chief operations officers who might be watching this and screaming at their computers. Why not then? If it's an operating model change.
Yeah, I think they've got their work cut out with BAU from what I can see. I think you've got to keep the wheels on the bus. I think at this moment there's so much pressure ultimately in these businesses in terms of you know, onboarding work, delivering work, managing cost, managing supply chains. There's just too much in there possibly to also be the person in the racy that's accountable for AI.
Okay. So, you know, if you're looking at the board and by extension the business that you're overseeing, do the metrics that you look at to get a sense of whether they're doing well or not change in this new world? I mean, does it move away from just the real looking profitability metrics to something which talks to the change that's being made?
Yeah, I mean, we love our dashboards in our private equity backed businesses for sure. We're reasonably good at our lag and lead indicators, but we definitely don't have the right ones yet. Yeah. You know, how do you assess the productivity, the efficiency, the quality of your agents or your humans' use of agents or agentic AI? I think we're figuring that out. I've got a theory that it might be based on tokens and how much how many tokens you're consuming and the quality of the thinking that you're asking your AI to do. You know, one end it could be really simple, the other end it could be really complex. I'd love to know how much complex thinking we do in these business based somehow on the way that the tokens are getting consumed.
Is that not a bit of an input measure rather than output one, where maybe you're looking at output and effect rather than inputs?
Well, I'm kind of thinking that the tokens, how they get consumed, are the output of the quality of the AI use in a business. I don't know yet, we haven't figured it out, but that's the only way at the moment I can think of that we're going to be able to measure our use of AI, because tokens are the only directly measurable way of working out how much AI you're using in a business.
Yeah, I suppose the other ones might be rate of change of efficiency metrics, perhaps, things like that.
Yeah. Tough to measure, isn't it? Yeah, tough. I mean, we're certainly in the back office of Copilot and ChatGPT able to see like who is using and how many agents they're using and which agents they're using. It feels quite crude at the moment because it's just not measuring quality. It could be that 2 hours that you used AI for was just like so amazing versus the 20 hours of just the boring stuff that someone else might have used. You just can't tell that. Which is why I'm quite interested to see if we can get to the quality of the work or the depth of thinking that the agents are doing. We need some measure somehow on the deep thinking that the agents are doing for us.
So that comes back to a question I asked before, was the challenge that you have where you do tokenize and bring in and borrow from other platforms like OpenAI, is you do lose that insight.
Sure.
Which means that you do then lose the capability to understand or inference your agents to the point where you can actually understand the value chain that they're actually adding into the business.
I definitely haven't got to the answer to that yet, but what I often try and do is think, how do we manage and measure humans? And can we just use that as a way of measuring and managing our agents? Why do we have to reinvent any of this management of agents? Just because it feels technical and a little bit techy or a little bit IT-y, we seem to approach the problem in a different way. But in a world where there are humans and agents working in a workflow, can we just think about them all the same? I'm kind of trying to figure that out. I don't know whether I've got the answer yet.
Or is that a level of granularity that you have to go to, though? Because if you're looking at this from the perspective of the board and the investor, the top line of metrics that you're going to care about is going to be EBITDA and multiplier. And then below there's going to be efficiency metrics. How far down do you want those KPIs to be measured for you to then view and check progress against? Or would you just stay at the sort of efficiency level and the lag indicators like?
Well, certainly at board level, we should be staying super high, but then this then comes down to, do we want our managers to manage humans and agents, because they're going to be managing business units, divisions, factories, whatever it may be. Are they ready to manage both? Most of our managers are still struggling with managing humans, let alone kind of throwing an agent in there as well.
Very true. Very true. Okay, so if you are coaching one of your CEOs on this topic, and I don't want to fixate on AI because I'm sure there's lots of other things you coach them on, but what advice would you give them in terms of how to pull together their value creation plan and their transformation journey to then become more competitive and more valuable in the market? What are the top tips that you give them?
We've certainly benefited from using external advice, for sure. We risk only knowing what we know, and in the world of AI, we don't know much. In truth, much better to benefit from someone who kind of lives and breathes it day in, day out, and has the kind of the benefit of seeing lots of businesses across lots of industries, and help us take the best of everything. I definitely see the benefit, and I would encourage the CEOs to do that. Again, in my world of the PE-backed businesses, we benefit from lots of people approaching private equity firms to share this knowledge. And we kind of get that for free in a lot of cases, so that's pretty helpful. I definitely think chief execs benefit from being in peer groups at the moment. So I run a peer group for my chief execs where they're all learning off each other, and they're all developing at different paces, but they kind of get comfort and inspiration from people of a similar level to them. So I think we get a lot of benefit from that.
So they're not direct competitors.
They're not direct competitors, no. I run a little WhatsApp group for my chief execs, and it's just called AI-enabled CEOs. And on there, we post things from LinkedIn, we post things that we might read in our kind of journals and stuff, podcasts, exactly that. And, we come together and just kind of share what we're all up to. So peer group learning feels like quite a good thing to do at the moment if you're a chief exec. Otherwise, you'll worry that you're just not doing enough, you don't know enough. I'd encourage people to have working groups inside the business, a bit like you do with HR and culture. We've all got brand ambassador forums within the business. Why not have an AI forum? Because I bet you there's a ton of knowledge. Going back to our grads again, particularly in the grads, who are probably experimenting. There's a whole bunch of shadow AI going on in these businesses that we've got no idea of, but why don't we try and take some of the benefit of that? So those are probably three really obvious, perhaps practical examples.
Yeah. So talked a bit about some of the amazing upsides with AI in terms of how you can use it to grow your top line and build efficiency and to act as a thought partner. How much time do you think about some of the challenges and the risks? So you've mentioned things like shadow AI and what the effect that has on information security. Clearly there's a far larger exposure to things like cyber intrusion, AI-dominated world, and there's loads of other governance challenges. So how much do you drill into those things?
Yeah. Well, we run a risk register. We have Risco every 6 months in the businesses, the boards I sit on. The big three risks I see at the moment, and you probably just captured them brilliantly actually, was one is around adoption. A risk is that we don't adopt fast enough and well enough. Exactly that. I would then definitely add in the cyber attack risk for sure. But I'd also then add in the risk of kind of leakage of IP. So back to that world of vectorized data and all your knowledge and intelligence sits there with an AI agent and then a playbook kind of accessing it. The risk of that leaving the organization. So in the old days, the risk might have been the CRM database went missing. The risk now is even greater because the intelligence that we're capturing in a database is just so much more about the business. So how the hell do we lock that down? That's the kind of problem that we're all trying to figure out. And to your point on cyber attack, I mean, it feels a little bit a case of kind of when rather than if for all of our organizations these days. And we're putting more at stake, more at risk if we're having these databases of all of our intelligence. So it's something we think about quite a lot actually, and we'll run a kind of mock attack twice a year at a board level to make sure that we're kind of ready enough for when it happens, and we all know our roles when it happens. We're all running MDR type services and getting advised in terms of people who are thinking about threat intelligence in our particular industries. So I hope we're doing enough, and it's a big expense to kind of protect yourself on the cyber risk, but I don't think it's an expense when you appreciate what you might be losing.
Yeah, it's a small expense compared with the impact.
Which is the house. You might lose your whole house here. Exactly that. Yeah.
Okay, so wrapping all of this up, I guess if you distilled your learnings about AI and its effect on your businesses over the past years and in the coming years, what are the top 3 or 4 effects, and what's your top practical tip for anybody who's in that CEO position today?
Yeah. Well, I think as a CEO you've got no choice but to go away and experiment, be curious. You can't be expected to lead the organization if you're not leading it when it comes to AI. So build yourself an AI twin, do what I did, put your job description in there, put your CV in there, put your psychometric profile in there, start to use it to help you do your work and be more productive. Use it as a thought partner. I would definitely do that. I would help the organization think really carefully about how to prioritize its pilots and its proof of concepts, and think a little bit about what we said in terms of where you're going to get the best return, but possibly also the most success and best adoption. Our experience has been the commercial team for sure. So they were really willing and excited to start experimenting with agents, because if you can reduce their proposal writing time down from 12 hours to 30 minutes, they're definitely going to bite your hand off to have an agent for sure. And then I would I'd start finding a language around being AI first and being AI literate and helping the organization get used to hearing that. And start to try and tip the balance of the people that are using it and aware of it from better than 50-50 for sure, which is where it might be today.